What's up, guys? It's Classical Chris back again with another magical musical moment. Today's lesson, we're going to be talking about ornaments. And the 5 ornaments we're going to be discussing today are the Achikatura, the Appoggiatura, the Mordent, the Turn, and the Trill. Let's get started. Okay, so we're playing some music here, and all of a sudden we see all these little funky cymbals, little tiny notes with little slashes through them, maybe 2 little notes with all these curvy lines and everything else. And then there's this little squiggly thing that almost looks like the little pattern on Charlie Brown's t-shirt during the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown. And you're like, well, what is all this stuff? Did somebody make a splotch on the music? Somebody messing with my mind? Am I seeing things? Am I having some sort of issue here? But no, these are all different signs for what are called ornaments. Not the kind of ornaments you put on your Christmas tree. The first one I want to address today is something called the acciaccatura. Now that's a huge Italian word. It sounds like something you would order at the restaurant. You know, the waiter comes up to you and he says, "Buonasera, what would you like to eat?" And you say, "Oh, I'd like a plate of acciaccatura," you know. It sounds like something that's real tasty, doesn't it? But what it really is, it's a note that kind of just really quickly just kind of jumps in and kind of goes right before the principal note, which is the normal sized note on the music. And what it does is it's a very quick kind of like boom, like it just kind of shoots itself in there, kind of like that. It has no real metrical value, but it just has a little something interesting than just going. You go. It's like, kind of like a vocal technique. You just kind of slide into the note and then you just keep going. It just adds a little something fun to it. And a lot of times, especially in Baroque era music, which was repeated a lot, a lot of these types of pieces in Baroque music, especially when you get into the suites, S-U-I-T-E-S, not the sweets like you eat, you know, at Thanksgiving dinner or whatever, like that sort of thing, or Halloween. But you have all the different dances, the allemande, the courant, the sarabande, the gavotte, the gigue, all those. And they all have repeat signs. And you repeat the whole A section, the whole B section, and it feels like it drags on and on and on forever. It's like watching grass grow sometimes. But the part of the reason for those repeats is for the performer, for the instrumentalist, whether it be guitar or at the time the lute or the harpsichord, what you're meant to do is on the repeat is you're expected really to what we would call improvise and kind of add some grace notes, add a little something interesting so that the listener goes, oh, he's a virtuoso, he's really good. So if the original line goes, maybe what you end up doing as a performer the second time through, maybe you end up going like that, or maybe one of those deals. Somewhere you kind of trill a note, do something like that. And so that's what you kind of get. The acciaccatura is just a quick note that goes up into the principal note or down into the principal note, like that. So you could have it go in ascending or descending. Now the next thing we want to talk about is something called the Appoggiatura, which is a big Italian word like acciaccatura, but Appoggiatura is a different thing. It's also got it's that little small note, but it doesn't have the slash through it. And what the Appoggiatura means, Appoggiatura, appoggiare, if you will, for Italian, means to lean into something. And so what you're doing is you're leaning into the note. So let's say you've got a note here, a C note, but then you see this little tiny D note before it. That's your Appoggiatura note. And so what that does is, like the government, it sucks away half of the value and takes half of the value for themselves. And so what you got here is instead of 1, 2, you end up getting 1, 2, that sort of thing. Now, you might be asking, hey, Chris, why don't they just write in that note and then the next note? Why put the little grace note thing there and why not just write them all out like that? Well, because maybe, like I said before, the original piece of music just had that note in it, and it was up to the performer to improvise, to do things. So maybe they wanted it to go the second time through, or maybe hold them a little bit longer and then keep moving on like that. So again, musicians in the Baroque era, especially the Baroque era, but even before, were not only expected, but they were encouraged to improvise. And that really showed off the talent of the musician. And so that's why we kind of leave it a little bit more open for private interpretation, because the way I might do something may be different than the next guy. So that's what we have with an appoggiatura. The next thing I want to talk about is the mordent. Now the mordent, the Italian word from that is mordere, and that means to bite. So what we're doing is we're biting into the note. And so if our home note, if our principal note, let's say let's go with A. I've been up on the lower frets for a while. Let's go up to A. Now what we can do there is it would be like that, and it would be two notes. The principal note, the note below it, and back to the original note. It also is two little notes that look like an appoggiatura or an acciaccatura, but the thing about the mordent, whether it's a lower mordent or an upper mordent, is it always returns to the principal note. So if I start on A, and I go down to G sharp and come back, that's what I do. Or if I go to the upper note, I come back to that same note. And the way you can tell the difference is the lower mordent looks like the Charlie Brown t-shirt with a line right through it, and the regular mordent, which goes to the higher note, is just the squiggles. The next thing I want to talk about is the turn. And the turn looks like, you ever seen those Stella Dora cookies that maybe your grandmom or your mom used to buy at the store, and they're shaped like fancy S's, like kind of like that? That's what that is. That's a turn. And so what we have is we have two types of turns. We have the regular turn, which is just that fancy S, and then it starts on the note above it, goes to the actual principal note, goes to the note below it, and goes back to the actual principal note. So again, if my principal note is A, I'm going to start on B, go to A, go down to G sharp, and then back to A, if I'm in A major, of course. So it would sound like this, like that. So it's all hammer on and pull off. It's very, very legato. Now if I have one of those fancy cymbals again with a line through it, just like with the mordent before, now it starts on the lower note, goes up, and then comes back. So instead of, I have the opposite, like that. That sort of thing. And that is what we call the turn. Now the very last thing I want to talk about, guys, is something called the trill. The trill is basically when you stay on the same notes, but you just go back and forth between them over and over and over and over and over. So let's choose another note. Let's choose B this time. Let's say I want to trill on the B note, and I can do a lower trill or an upper trill. Now before about 1830 or so, the trill was always known to start on the note right above the actual note, the principal note, and then to come back to the principal note. So let's say I'm in some key let's say I'm in B major, what the heck, let's say I'm in B major. That means the next note above is C sharp. So if there's a B note here that's written and it says TR over top of it, which means trill, I start on the C sharp note. So instead of going, I would start on the C sharp note and go like that sort of thing. After about 1830 or so, composers would write like a little tiny grace note that looks like an acciaccatura with a little slash through it on the note above it to indicate that they want you to start on the note above. So you would go without that. Again, post 1830 or so, if you just see a note that says trill, you can start on the upper note or the lower note if there's no little thingamajig there. Either way, guys, you know, the ornament police are not going to come to your door and take you away in handcuffs because you played, you know, this note first and that note somewhere else. Maybe somebody at a university somewhere will be sitting and watching you and going, he didn't play that note first. But who cares what that guy thinks? He's too busy, you know, finding Pokemons in people's driveways and not getting a life of his own. So don't worry about that. So that's my video today about ornaments, guys. Again, we went over the trill, the turn, the mordent, the appoggiatura, and the acciaccatura. All really good ingredients to make the music you are playing just a little bit more interesting and for yourselves a little bit more fun to play. Thanks so much for watching, and remember, practice and play with purpose. Thanks so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you haven't done it already, click the like button, click subscribe, hit the bell for notifications so every time I drop a new video, you know exactly when it comes out. Please feel free to share this with all of your friends. I would really appreciate it to help me get my name out there. And again, guys, thanks so much, and I look forward to seeing you in the next magical musical moment. And if you're interested in taking your guitar playing to the next level and you want to take private lessons, please feel free to visit my website, www.classicalchris.com. Drop me an email, and I would be glad to work with you one-on-one.